And today's session is about future skills. A lovely session packed with a lot of insights about how you can groom yourself for the future. And while you plan your grooming, we have a wonderful set of panelists. We are honored and privileged to have the industry leaders, the institutional leaders, Mr. Pradeep Khanna, whom I will introduce very shortly to you, and the 3I perspective of youth. We have Divij as well as Manish, who comes in from a perspective of being a student, and Divij is a youth professional, and Mr. Narayanan is our industry expert for the day. We would also be joined by our institutional leadership, which is primarily Professor Ram Gopal Rao, in a short while. And before we do that, I would like to get started with a few introductions. Our moderator for the day, Mr. Pradeep Khanna, is Executive Director, Asia Pacific VR and AR Association, Australia. And he's also the founder, CEO of Global Mindset. Pradeep Khanna is focused on leveraging globalization and digitization for learning and working. He has over 30 years of executive and management experience across various industries. And Pradeep has also been a leader of IBM, JBS in Australia and New Zealand. He's leveraged his strengths from a perspective of business and leadership across India, China, Philippines, Vietnam, Egypt, Romania, and Brazil. Pradeep is a speaker at many international conferences. He's an adjunct professor, visiting faculty at a number of institutions in Australia, in Singapore, and in India. And he's also the executive panel of global consulting companies and open college industry advisory panels. He studied MBA from AGSM, UNSW, MSc Computer Science from UTS, and BTech from IIT Delhi. Welcome, sir. We have our industry leader today with us, who is Mr. Narayanan Ramaswamy. He's the partner and national head future workforce at KPMG. And Narayanan is a senior partner and national head for future workforce practice at KPMG India. He has over 23 years of rich experience in leading assignments focused on skill development, education, the social sector advisory, and he's an acknowledged thought leader and represents KPMG in multiple forums. He was invited to be part of the expert committee to review the new educational policy by the Government of India. So we are privileged to hear that perspective as well. And Mr. Ramaswamy is a board member of KPMG's Global Skills Center of Excellence, focused on new age skills solutions and future of jobs. So who better from an industry leadership perspective to talk to us today on future skills. Thank you, sir, for taking time, and welcome to YCC 2020. We have our youth professional today with us, who is Divij Chopra. He's manager, insurance go-to-market and solutions at Capgemini Elite. Divij is a technology consultant for Capgemini and is part of the Elite management program, mostly in the insurance solution space. His role is at the intersection of technology and business, leveraging cutting-edge advancements from the industry to shape differentiated digital solutions for insurance clients. Divij is a management postgraduate from XLRI, Jamshedpur, with a chemical engineering background. So from chemistry to his current role in shaping digital solutions, let me introduce and welcome Divij Chopra. He regularly works with startups as well in the space of AI and ML and data space, collaborating to define winning partnerships. Divij, thank you for taking time and talking to our youth. Welcome to YCC 2020. And we have with us our student, and our youth student is Manish Sridhar. Thank you, Manish, for staying up late. Why does he stay up late? It's, I think, a little past 12 for him in Montreal, Canada. So he's a student of Concordia University, and Manish is currently pursuing his master's degree in industrial engineering at Concordia University. That's in Montreal, Canada. He has completed BE in industrial engineering and his management from the Visvesvaraya Technological University at Dayanand Sagar College of Engineering, Bangalore. Manish is very enterprising. He's already worked on projects based on call center operations of the midday meal initiative, production optimization problems, to name a few. He has developed a keen interest in production systems and manufacturing and finds it to be a very interesting domain for his future. I think with that, we have Professor Ramagopal join us as well. Professor, good morning. Nice to see you. Namaste and welcome to YCC 2020. If we can have, I'll make a quick introduction of Professor. Professor had a few login issues, but we're glad to have him back. Professor Ram Gopal Rao is no stranger at IIT Delhi. He's the director of IIT Delhi, and Professor Rao is the director of the Indian Institute of Technology. He also is a P.K. Kelkar Chair Professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering at the IIT Mumbai, and is now current director at IIT Delhi. Ram Gopal has more than 450 publications in various journals and 43 patents in the areas of electron devices and nanoelectronics. Ram Gopal was also the first elected chairman for the Indian section of the American Nano Society. Welcome, sir. Thank you for joining YCC 2020. It's a pleasure having a wonderful panel this morning for our future skills. And over to you, Mr. Pradeep, for the session.
Thank you very much, Sudhir. I am delighted to be talking to all of you from Sydney in Australia. We are in the Southern Hemisphere, and unlike you, we are in the peak of winters. So it's bright and sunny from Sydney. A big hi to you. And I'm looking forward to this panel session, which has leaders from academia, leaders from industry. We have a young professional and a young student today joining us, looking at what is the future direction of skills. We are living in times where soon the labor market will become tactical, where an employer will say that I have a budget X and I need skills Y. And he'll say that, okay, if you meet the budget and have the skills, come and do the job, and then thank you, talk to you later. In this tactical labor market or the new workforce that we are coming across, we will be required to change careers at least 4 to 7 times during our life. We will be in a lifelong learning environment. It will be like a learning continuum where we dip in and out as required as we meet the changing needs of the labor market and as we change our careers. So, what do we do? Should we just take up a university degree and think that it is going to prepare us for the rest of our life? Should we join a startup? Should we work for a startup? Or should we just take some IT certification for kickstarting our career? there are so many career options to kickstart our working life. And this working life where we are all living longer, we will not only be learning all the while, but we'll also be working all through, because it doesn't happen that you are 24 by 7 connected one day and the next day you say that I want to play golf, and you keep doing that for months on together. So with this, I want to get perspectives from all the leaders and representatives of different stakeholders over here. And I'll kickstart the first question with Professor Ram Gopal Roy. Professor Rao, what is the value proposition of a higher education university in today's times? Why should I, if I were a young student like Manish, be looking at studying at a higher education when I've got so many different career paths? So over to you, Dr. Rao.
It's a very interesting question, but it's a continuously, the answer is continuously evolving. And the answer also depends on who you ask. Since you asked me, since I am representing the IIT system in a way, but if you had asked the same question to a university vice chancellor, I think you would have got a very different answer. Even the JNU vice chancellor would have given a very different answer. But from an IIT's perspective, or from the tier 1 institutions anywhere in the world perspective, if you are looking for an answer, IITs, for example, your generation, when you came to IITs were basically a stepping stone to go abroad. I think nothing else mattered. It was the easiest way to go abroad. As they used to say, in those days, the body reaches IIT, but the soul would have reached US kind of a thing. In your case, it reached Australia, but I think in many others' case, it reached the US. And then times have changed. I think now, last 20 years, if you look at that remains so maybe for almost like 20, 30 years, that phase of IIT education. Then it became like you come to IIT for security, you get a job because you are guaranteed a job now if you get into IIT. That's the reason in a country like India, which is a young country, just 73 years old, we will be celebrating our Independence Day, on August 15th. So the thing is 73 years now, if you are looking at it. So or what, 1947, yeah, 73 years. So now if you are looking at the IIT education today, things have now become very different. So I think the many children or many parents want to come to IIT simply because it gives you that guarantee in life that once you come to IIT, you are given a certain social status, you get a certain kind of a job, and your life is set. I think that's all what they are looking for with an IIT education today. But things are also changing. Recently, we did a survey. We asked our students, what is that you want your degree to really do for you? And I thought the answer is to get a job in some of these kind of industries. But I was surprised to learn myself that every second student wants to become an entrepreneur eventually. Now they are not even looking for jobs. Now from going abroad to finding a job, now they are all saying, we want a degree that will enable us to start our own enterprise at some point in our career. I think that is what now we are looking at. Now when you keep that as the aspiration goal for the students, now your entire curriculum needs to be looked at differently. It's no longer teaching them some skills so that they can go and find a job. Now if they are going to build their own enterprise, exposing them to the social problems, making them socially aware of what is happening around them, I think and also giving them all the necessary skills to build a team, to be able to identify a problem, to be able to lots of hands-on kind of an experience so that they can actually build solutions. I think these skills are now becoming much more important than ever before, and that is where now the institutions are evolving. To me at IIT Delhi, if you ask me, our role as tier 1 institution is to produce more job providers or job creators than produce students who become job seekers. I think that is a role the tier 1 institutions need to take up now in a country like India, I think, and that is when, India will eventually reach where the developed countries are, at some point in time. I think that I think is what a higher education degree from an IIT should actually do.
I love the comment that you talked about, that you are seeing every second applicant wanting to be an entrepreneur, and the institute changing focus to looking at how best can we create job providers. And this is a long way off from the time when I finished my IIT Delhi degree. I fully understand. But let me get the industry perspective, and this is over to you, Narayanan. What do you see? Do you see that a conventional university providing a pathway? Or for that matter, a university which is adapting itself to the changing requirements of the new workforce by reorienting themselves towards more entrepreneurship? Is that the way that you see? What about the multiple pathways? So over to you, Narayanan.
Sure, thank you so much. And that was very interesting question, Pradeep, and also Dr. Rao. That was a very good perspective from an IIT or kind of an institution which is right on the top. I work with a lot of universities, and I also work with a lot of universities in their formative stages. India is at a stage where it's a very rare opportunity to be helping setting up universities. If you look at Australia, US, when is the last time a university was set up? But that's happening like so much in India. So I'm trying to look at it from an established university like IIT or JNU or some of those. I mean, I understand the difference between a unitary and a specialized institution like IIT and a university, and also some of the newer ones who are just about entering the fray. So in my view, the 700-year-old concept of what is a university that they trace back to when Oxford was formed is being questioned. Where is the need for somebody to have an institution that will give a degree? And that degree is something like a stamp of approval and authority about a particular person so that he or she can get into the civil society or the other parts where he or she is going to live from then on. And I'll explain what that means. When you're in school, all you need is to have a examination and a certificate to go to university. So all entire school education seems to be gearing up towards, are we eligible to go to the university or not? Then you enter a university, and then in the university you try and learn a lot of life skills, something that that is going to be useful for you for the rest of your life. To me, the concept of I've completed my education, that you keep hearing a lot of people of our generation and the previous generation say, I've completed my education and I've come to work. I've come to take up this role in military. I've come here for managing civil services. That is gone. There is nothing called completing an education. The reason is how in the 4 years, if I take engineering, for example, in the 4 years that you are learning, it changes so much in the world outside. So how is that you define a curriculum? Let me take an example. Now, let me say I define a curriculum for, say, an automobile engineer, which is offered in 2020, which means the curriculum was designed in 2018 or 2019. It got all the approvals, and by 2020 it is introduced. Then the student studies for 4 years. So by 2024, say he or she gets out. What is the guarantee? And it's actually more on the other side, that whatever was thought out in the best interest in 2018-19 is relevant in 2024. So increasingly what is happening is universities are becoming the places where you shape some of the fundamentals for youngsters. Are you developing certain qualities that is going to help them learn further? Are you teaching them how they should learn and unlearn and relearn, rather than give some gospels of life and say, this is what you will follow for the rest of your life? I'm also very excited by what the new national education policy says in India about multiple entries and exits. Why should I study for all 4 years, boxed up in an environment that perhaps is cocoon, not knowing what is happening outside? And why should I not go to that place which is happening and then come back? Because there is tremendous value that a university system can give, because when you are in the industry, you don't get to the fundamentals and get to think ahead, because you're caught on with what you're doing. Whereas in the university system, you have time to actually think, pause, and reflect. So that, in my view, is the role of the university. A university should help people ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. It should develop that curiosity, and it should develop their ability to look forward and prepare themselves for whatever endeavor that they are going to take post a university education.
So, in other words, Narayan, what you are saying is that the university is nothing but a foundation which trains you to think logically and to kind of apply the skills as you go down the learning continuum or the working continuum all through your life. Yeah, I think there is a certain truth in what you are saying, or I seem to be subscribing to that particular aspect. But let me get the perspectives of the people who are actually the subject of what we are talking about. And I want to go over first to Manish from Montreal. Manish, my question to you is that you are at the moment pursuing masters in Canada. You did your bachelor's in India. Now, when you finish your bachelor's, did you feel that you were ready to start in the workforce? Why did you go and decide to do a master? Did you think that this is going to help you get a better job? Why did you go and decide that I want to go to Canada to study? Why did you not look at it? Did you look at options of having your own startup or doing any other kind of a career path? So over to you, Manish. I want to hear your perspectives.
Okay, thank you, sir, for the question. So for me, when I was done with my bachelor's degree in India, from a really young age, I was very ambitious about learning something related to, say, mechanical engineering and production systems and everything, as I've mentioned before. But also, one of the reasons I took up the idea of doing a master's was that after doing my bachelor's, I didn't really feel I was 100% ready, because I knew for a fact that I had a lot of theoretical experience in studying in a good university, in a good college, and doing well in studies. But I feel I needed a bigger skill set and something which had more, hands-on experience with, say, like working on projects or interacting with a lot more people in the industry, which also helps for you to be a better employee. So that was one of the reasons I decided to study abroad. And by the choice of Canada, I mean, I have always looked up to some of my family members who have come to Canada before to study. And also I chose Canada because in Montreal, say Quebec, the state in Canada has a very big manufacturing and aviation industry here. And right now, as I did my research before coming here, they're in actually a very desperate need of workforce for industrial engineers and also like civil engineers, etc. So that was one of the main reasons I came here to study.
So thank you very much. So the key point that I hear from you is that, while you felt that you had a good theoretical background, but you thought that you needed some skills component, as part of your learning experience. And the Canada decision was because of a number of factors, both personal, family, and otherwise. Okay, let me go to now Divich, who is what I would say that has got maybe about 8 to 10 years, professional work experience. Which you have been listening to various perspectives. If you had the opportunity to revisit your education and career, would you have gone to an higher education institute? And what, coming now at so many years into your career, do you think that whatever you learned at the higher education institute I'm not talking about XLRI. XLRI is slightly a different ballgame, but I'm now talking at your graduate level studies. Do you think that was relevant to what you are doing at this particular point in time? So over to you, Divij.
Well, sir, for my particular case, I would say, the stream that I'm currently working in as, that's very clear from the background that I come off, that it's very different from what my undergrad education was. So, the starting up to that point, but still in terms of how that, the education and the knowledge that I got from my undergraduation from NIT Jaipur and how that's helping me in performing my current role. I mean, sure, education thus gives out a lot of skills that that helps you perform a role better. But what I lacked, I mean, the whole curriculum that I kind of went through, the lacking or the gap that I saw in terms of how that prepared me for the real time was it kind of lacked an industry perspective. Gave me the gap that I figured out was more towards having not that business acumen. That kind of acumen I did not develop during my training and education at NIT. And from that perspective, I think higher education made more sense to me, because if you see the current talent economy, it is shifting from a purely a skill based and a delivery based kind of a model to how what value you bring to the table. I mean, you started off with a very valid point that this is a talent economy, and the economic value of someone who's getting hired is more important than what the skills or the education that they bring along. So, how that education made me do better in my current role, or equipped me with the right skills or traits to perform my job, and where it lagged. On the lagged part, I think the exposure to the industry, how to create value out of my skills, how to collaborate with a lot of other people having the right skill and single-handedly manage or curate as such the value that you bring to the organization, as well as that collaboration part that I think went missing from what my formal education was. And that's, I understand, that's something you learn with experience. But in terms of if we discuss how to fix how do we fix the current
We will
academic
come to
curriculum.
that. That
Mhm.
particular aspect will come to that. But I just want one answer from you, that if you had an opportunity to relive your life, would you have taken the same steps in terms of going to a higher education and to XLRI?
Yeah, of
Just
course. I mean,
quick
from
answer.
the, yeah, I mean, from the outlook of how the industry is moving and how I see from my experience right now, I mean, it made absolute sense to go for a higher degree, because just a formal education in from a technical background was not cutting, it was not cutting enough to give me the exposure that I need to bring value to the table that I do right now with my higher education and, kind of the business outlook that I got from my
Okay.
master's.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now the key perspectives that I can distill from Manish and Divij is that when they finished their graduation, they felt that they needed some more skills element. Number two was that there was a need for industry academia collaboration, and therefore there was need for skills which were more industry relevant. And which gets me to the second point, that as we look at the economy, that labor market, as we are kind of moving through, which is becoming more and more tactical, and the focus is becoming more on skills, should we have a higher component of skills in the higher education? Now, for this, I want to go down to Professor Rao. Rao, what are your comments on that? You're on mute, sir.
Even this question whether the higher education is relevant or not, I think is all driven by one Mark Zuckerberg here or one Bill Gates there. I think we are going in a completely wrong direction by even asking this question. I can name at least 10 other founders who have gone to a good university and learned the skills and use their networks to start a company. You look at Amazon, or you look at Google, you look at Tesla, you look at Yahoo, you look at Bose, you look at Dolby. All these guys are properly educated in universities and all that. And Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg are an exception. I mean, they are all gifted kind of people, and our children following them and dropping out of colleges and schools, trying to do something silly at the very early age. I think I keep advising anybody who says I want to drop out, not to look at, they are not Zuckerberg, they are not Bill Gates, and that everybody can be successful. I think having said that, one of the things that we need to provide in our higher education is we give a lot of information. When a student comes to our campuses, we teach them math, physics, chemistry, engineering, analog circuits, digital circuits, what have you. But I think what we don't give them sufficiently enough is the big picture. Where do you apply this knowledge? How to connecting the dots eventually is going to be the biggest thing in life. You have all this information. How well can you connect all these dots so that you can do something worthwhile with your education? I think so that perception or that big picture is what we need to provide. For example, at both the places, whether it is IIT Delhi or IIT Bombay, where I have been teaching for almost like 2 decades now, we introduced these courses in the very first year. In the very first year, we have a course on just mobile phone. Let's say you take iPhone. Now you break apart iPhone and then you tell children what all goes into building this gadget, how many different disciplines come in, where does analog circuits that you are going to learn eventually will fit in, where will your MEMS technologies will fit in, where will sensors fit in. I think, once we provide the big picture, it even motivates all these children, towards doing something big. And also they will be able to connect the dots, that they are going to have in their curriculum. I think, that big picture is what we need to provide in the academic institutions. And after that, it's also education to me is something that remains after you have forgotten everything that has been taught. I think, what do I remember out of my BTech education? Nothing. Now I'm completely on my own. I've formed so many new things, done so many different things. So therefore, education is what remains after you have forgotten, what is taught in the classroom. I think giving, that ability to learn new things is going to be the most important thing in our life, because everything is changing so fast now. That ability to learn, that confidence to learn new things, I think is all what we need to provide to our children. The skills that we give, if I make our children, industry ready for today's industry, they will be out of job tomorrow, because industries are also evolving. Industries are also changing. I think it has to be all about ability to learn. That confidence to learn new things is what we need to provide.
So you have touched on 2 important things. That one is to create that ability to learn, and also to provide an overarching perspective that people are able to get the bigger picture. But my question also was that should we increase the skills component into a higher education degree? What is your response to that?
I would think a more hands-on component. I think that is probably is a little bit disproportionately low to what we want to do. I would call skills component as hands-on component.
Yes.
If I would have learned analog circuits for 4 years, but unless I build a circuit on my own for a given application, I wouldn't have the confidence that I can do something with my knowledge. I think that hands-on component is what we definitely need to increase in our business.
Fabulous. So we're looking at 3 things. One is the bigger picture, more hands-on, as well as our ability of critical thinking, design thinking. So with that, I want to go over to Narayanan. Narayanan, what are your perspectives on this?
Sure. So I agree with Professor Rao that swinging to one extreme and saying the entire university education not serving a purpose is way too extreme. And I'll tell you why. If I were to start my career, if I were to start anything, it did not even be engineering. I want to be a writer, or I want to be a lawyer. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start straight jump into the code? Or do you want to first learn what are the basics, understand what are the cases that have happened, understand different aspects of being a lawyer, and then you will become an understudy for a senior lawyer, and then you start arguing the code. So if you want to become a writer, what do you do first? First, you need to understand what are the basics of literature, linguistics. And you need to understand what are the fundamentals that goes into becoming a writer. Then you start attempting smaller things, then you become a writer. So I can go on. The point here is, my view is higher education particularly has been in a cocoon for a long time. The problem is why it has been in a cocoon and how do we get it out? and not to completely ignore it. I think that is a disaster. Coming back to the skills point, there is a continuum of what you call as skills and what you call as education. So if I'm a welder, I mean, skilling normally we relate to some of the basic things, right? To me, everything is skilling. A pilot is a skilled driver, right? To that extent, it is also a skill. There's nothing that makes driving a plane different from driving a car. But in our mindset, we think driving a car is some quote unquote, and pardon me, I don't mean anything negative, a lowly skill set. And somehow driving a plane is something great, a blue collared one and a white collared one, as the case may be. So my point is, if you want to put to use what you have learned, then it gets into the skilling component. That is where I agree with Dr. Rao. What perhaps our education institutions were missing, for some reason they've gone back into teaching only the theory aspects of it, which is very important. Where else can you learn theory? And once you get into the industry, you don't have the chance, you don't have the space to actually learn fundamentals. And we work on a lot of recognition of prior learning, where we feel those people who have jumped straight into the skill domain have missed an opportunity to learn why they are doing what they are doing, which would have enhanced their work content in a very, very big way. So I think universities should transform themselves to be a place where they not only teach the basics, they not only teach the fundamentals, and as Professor Rao rightly put, and as I was saying before, teaching them how to learn, how to be curious, how to unlearn, how to relearn, but also do a bit of experimentation. Suppose I am this one who is interested in, say, alternate energy. I study every possible theory about alternate energy, and then I step into this big bad world, and I'm completely shocked by the way things are happening. Rather than that, if I have a decent lab where I put some of the latest, photovoltaic or wind and other things as a bit of an experiment, as a closed room experiment, where you can afford to make mistakes, where you can afford to experiment a bit, and then you learn. And then when you step into that, and that should be as close to reality as possible, and not something that was donated by someone 20 years back. So that is an important facet where the industry should also step into academia and make sure that they are relevant. So once that is done, and it's the same everywhere. Suppose I'm in literature. Can I not just learn the basics? Can I also have a workshop where I actually am presenting a play of mine? So I'm taking pains to explain that across disciplines, not just in engineering, you need labs. You need places where you can experiment what you are learning, where you have an industry that will also help you. The last one that I want to mention is apprenticeship is a concept that we have forgotten. And I'm so glad in 2016, the government revived this, and there is a new Apprenticeship Act, which even incentivizes industry to actually pay for apprentices. And what more can you have? And there is enough push that is coming from the government also saying, you university, get back to having some amount of skill component, some amount of hands-on experimentation. And you industry, I will incentivize you, those who want to learn, allow them to learn, give them the theory aspect as well. So this connect is, to me, is very important. Unless we have this, and this has to be seamless. And you need to switch between one to another, which is not possible today.
So, in other words, what you are talking about is also, doing something with your hands. That is what apprenticeship is about, is getting you to have more on-the-job kind of a training to a certain extent. And of course, there are a couple of other things also that you mentioned about. Let me now go across to Divich. Divich, if the education that you got gave you a broad overview, it gave you an opportunity to experiment, it had more hands-on component, would that have helped you?
Sure, sir. I mean, I completely agree to both Professor Rao's and Narayan sir's point, because let me start off with one example. Since I work, in the tech domain, Angular is probably, and the computing and the coding languages that we, generally learn in a formal technical education. I mean, that without learning that, there is no kind of, opportunity to get to a tech space or without that. I agree to that point. But to the points of getting to a hands-on experience, I mean, from the industry or from the academics level onwards, if you also focus on how that, how industry is reacting to that education, how the trends in the industry or the use of that language is changing, and how, the advancements in those languages are being applied in the real business context, that would, that would really change the outlook of the students while gaining that, while gaining that education, so that they also understand that this is something, from that context, this is something that I will do on the job. And while I learn my technical and, the academic background of it, I also understand the bigger picture. I mean, that's been going around in the panel. And that also helps you understand what value you would be adding. And for that, for the same example of any coding language, if I get to understand that this particular language, is being used for this this particular application in the industry, I might as well go and, get my hands-on experience myself by myself experimenting on that application. To that point, adding to the current discussion,
Okay, so
even if the
what I
industry is not
hear is,
able to, sorry,
yeah, you're
yeah,
saying something.
even
I
if the
said, what I'm
industry,
hearing is that you need what there is seems to be a lot of emphasis on industry academia collaboration,
yep.
and for the skill sets or education to take into account what are the current and future trends in the industry. Would that be a fair summary of what you are saying?
Yes, and added to that, my point of sharing on the trends basis and not if the collaboration on, the apprentice or hands-on experience with the industry is not possible. Even if we aware the students that, this is the application in industry, and for someone something very trivial, they can might as well experiment on their own what the application on the job market would be if the academia, to start off, is not able to provide that collaboration.
So with that, let me go across to Manish. Manish, if and you are still a student, if like what we've been discussing, that you had an opportunity to get an overview, you had an opportunity to do this thing with your hand, and by hand I don't mean that you've got to be doing welding. Even having tactical IT skills is doing something with your hand. You had an opportunity to experiment. You had an opportunity to getting exposed to what are the industry trends and to align your skills in education with that. Would that have been a complete education for you? And this is to
Uh,
you, Manish.
Yes, sir. So I would really agree with the rest of the panelists that said creating awareness about the internships or getting apprenticeship or hands-on experience is one of the very key aspects of education. And like they said, as the system evolves, it is important for companies and enterprises to come together in order to educate their students accordingly, so that they're much prepared for not just now but also for the future. And for your question, I mean, even when I was studying in India, I remember that there were very good opportunities for internships. But one of the things that were lacking were not a lot of people were being recruited for internships. And you would see a lot of recruiters going to recruit people for full-time jobs. But at the same time, the internships were not taking in too many people. I mean, from my batch, they would probably have taken 4 or 5 people from, say, mechanical and industrial put together for a couple companies. So for me, I would have definitely said getting more hands-on experience and say internship experience would have increased my knowledge in the subject, and would have also have given a more clearer perspective on what the current industrial trends would be and how the industry trends would probably focus in the future. Maybe I might not anticipate it exactly right, but I would still have a sort of an edge about knowing how the trends might change ahead of time.
Okay, good. I like your response, and I'm seeing some questions coming up from the audience. And the first question which I am reading is saying that entrepreneur skills are now becoming a focus at the premier institutes like the IITs and IIMs. What is it that the IITs and IIMs or the tier one institutes are doing, and which other universities are not doing in India? And for that, I will go across to Professor Rao, and I will put a caveat, Professor Rao, that you see the IITs have the benefit of getting the best of the best. The admissions ratio, the people who clear the JEE are so small in number that if those people had been put into any environment, I presume they would have done, because statistically you got possibly the best brains. But taking that aside, what do you think the IITs, IIMs are doing, which other universities are not doing, especially in regard to entrepreneurial skills? Professor Rao, you are on mute.
Right. Yeah. Would also like to say that it's a misconception that IIT students are way better than other students. It's actually not true. I always give this example that you go to an NIT, right? And a student in NIT might be able to solve a problem in 30 seconds, while an IIT student might have done it in 20 seconds. That is the only difference between getting into an IIT or getting into an NIT. Now, in real life, whether you solve a problem on paper in 20 seconds or 30 seconds is actually not going to make any difference. Therefore, there are bright students in all institutions in the country. And I think, I would give credit to the IIT, success to its faculty. I think, as long as we are able to
I
attract
love that.
top brains to our institutions, IITs will remain what they are. Having said that, I think we are also doing many things now. I think to me, to become an entrepreneur, the first step is, to come over that narrow kind of a mindset. These children who come to our institutions today, thanks to our, the problems or hurdles that we have created to enter our institutions, for 3 years, they wouldn't have done anything other than preparing for an exam. These guys haven't even seen their drawing rooms properly. They are all stuck in one room and, are one coaching institute. And for them now, when they enter IIT, now they just come completely, everything is available, everything is open. Now, how do they traverse their journey in IIT? I think that is where we need to open up their minds. When they come to IIT, they have all these closed kind of minds, and to open up their eyes, we need to provide them, lot of opportunities. For that, at IIT Delhi, for example, we are connecting them to farmers in the village. Now an IIT student talking to a farmer in the village or staying with a farmer for 2 months, understanding how farming is done in this country, I can tell you will come back with much more enlightened than spending time at a top-notch industry or anything, because that opens up their mind. Once they get to know the right problems are, an IIT student spending a summer in All India Institute of Medical Sciences, just see what a doctor in an All India Institute of Medical Sciences goes through every day in treating those thousands of patients, what sort of issues the doctor would have, opens up their minds. I think we need to open up their minds, and further, these immersion programs is one good way which we are figuring out now is helping us. In the immersion program, you go and place them at different places, just to learn out of those real life situations. And we also started a minor degree program in entrepreneurship. Today, as an engineer, I know how to construct a dam. I mean, that bridge, I can learn from the textbooks, I can design, I have professors who have done that, all that I can do. But as an engineer, civil engineer today, that is not a sufficient skill. I also need to know the environmental impact of the dam. I need to know the sociological kind of impact the dam will have on people around you. That is when you become a all-rounded kind of an engineer. These are the skills that are required now to succeed in life and to succeed in your career. I think so that sort of a giving them opportunities to learn outside of their curriculum is what distinguishes a good institution from a not so good institution. So I think these are the opportunities we need to provide. I call them immersion programs. You can design multiple immersion programs for students to go and learn from a variety of places.
Professor Rao, what you've done today is that at one level you have deflated my ego. of that. It is not because I cracked the JE that I am what I am, kind of a thing. It is because of the faculty over there. And at the same time, you motivated me that if I had the chance to relive my life, maybe I should have become an academic where you were the director of IIT Delhi or something like that, you know. So I love that. So now going on to the second question from the audience, and this is also, I think, a very relevant question as I look at what is happening globally in across the world in various industries. I see so many Indians who are having leadership positions in global organizations in global roles. And the question really is that, you know, what skills are required to be a global CEO? And can or what is the current education system doing or helping us to acquire those skills? And for this, I will go across to Narayanan. Narayanan, what are your thoughts? And the question specifically is that what skills are required to be a global CEO? And is our current education system helping in acquiring these skills?
Well, if we know what does it take to become a good global CEO, I think we will be the most sought after in the world. Like, there are many people, including the Harvards of the world, who want to know what does it take to make a good CEO. So, and that is like a moving goalpost. I'll tell you why. I'll just give you an example and then we'll go. In the mid 80s, it's when three organizations were formed, almost close to each other. One is Microsoft, second is Infosys, third is this organization called Ramco Systems. All three were into information technology. All three took very different paths. And you know where Infosys is, you know where Microsoft is, you know where. My point here is the leadership is not something that is so easily defined. So I don't want to get into even hazard saying that, we will put this template of what does it take to create a leadership and then we'll teach in university. How I wish those things can happen. But having said that, 2-3 things are evident. One, statistics says by 2030, a third of the world's working age population will be from India. So make no mistakes. This is to all those who are outside India. You will have Indians in your organizations, and you will have many Indians who will reach all the way up to being the CEO or CXOs and other. Inevitable, 1/3 you have to be. So what are we doing? My question is, as Indians, as educational institutions, as civil society, are we preparing our generation to take up world leadership roles? How much are we exposing our youngsters to what is happening from across the globe? Do we know what does it take to move up in an American society, in a Latin American society, in Africa, in Middle East, in many of the Scandinavian countries, in Japan? They all need us. Sooner or later, you are going to have Indian talent moving on to all these places. So, in my view, the first thing that we should do is give exposure. The second thing we should do is have cohorts. I studied in an environment that was predominantly not just Indian, but from a particular part of India. And even marquee institutions like the IITs, where is the diversity factor? And there is a bit of regulation that is also hampering this. And I hope that is opening up now. To me, the first step towards creating international leaders is to create an environment while they are studying, while they are in the university, fields looks international. And second, there are future skills that you can only predict and learn, and you need to be flexible. For example, to me, emotional quotient is so important, which is not taught in any of the universities. There are a few universities that teach, let me not use a broad brush, but that's not considered right up in priority. To me, that's very important. To me, communication is so important that's not even taught properly in our B schools. You go out, it doesn't really matter what you know, it is how much you can communicate. So how much are we teaching our people to be emotionally stable, to move with different cohorts? Like, you will be working with somebody from Africa who comes with a different, brilliant person, but comes with a different mindset. If I were a leader, I'll have to extract the best out of the person from Africa. Similarly, one from US who over communicates. How do I get the best out of somebody from US? So if as Indian student, I am not exposed to these things and I am not taught certain fundamentals of how this happens, I cannot teach them exactly what happens, that they will have to learn. What Bill Gates did in mid-80s, he's definitely not doing now. His successor is definitely not going to do going forward. That doesn't mean the leadership of Microsoft has changed. They are evolving, they are adapting. So we need to build our students, we need to teach them the value of learning from an environment, adapting to them, and the fundamentals like the emotional quotient, like the curiosity to learn, like I said, communicating at the right forum in the right fashion. One of the things that we do in KPMG, even after we normally take people from best of B schools and others, but one of the first things that we do is how to communicate. You have a CEO with whom you have just about 2 minutes. You can't have a 40 slider and start explaining to him. At the same time, you are explaining something. I work in the education sector, right? And I'm saying this when Professor Rao is also around. Academicians love details. You go and tell them, in 10 seconds, I'll tell you what is required. They just throw you out, saying, what is this guy? He doesn't even get into. So you need to know when and how to communicate. So to me, what is important is providing the environment, teaching them the basics, not teaching them what exactly is required, which I don't think we can.
Love it. So if on one hand I have the academics who are making all the value addition, on the other hand I have the environment. Well, it doesn't really matter who the student is anyway. So, but coming back, going on a different tack, and this question is to Manish. Manish, if you had the flexibility of doing one subject in India, by going and attending a class on a face-to-face basis, and maybe doing another subject on online, from even potentially from a MOOC, maybe from edX or Coursera or even from IIT Delhi or whatever it might be, and maybe spending a time in Montreal at Concordia University. If you had that kind of a flexibility, would you have gone through the same path that you have gone through now? That, completed your degree first and then gone to Montreal for your master's and so on and so forth?
Yes, sir, that's a really good question, actually. I mean, I cannot give a totally clear answer as to what path I might have taken, but I can definitely say that the different interaction that I would have had with, say, different people in different places would have given me a lot more knowledge about how others think and how to respect others, say, methodology and thoughts. And that would really shape me better as a team player when it comes to coming into an industry. So maybe I might have thought about giving it a try to maybe try working with others, even say remotely, maybe on something on my personal basis, not exactly working as a job, or say do an independent project in order to know better about how the thoughts from these different people would be put together in a product, maybe. So that would have given me a lot more better perspective of the world and the technology that goes through.
Okay. Now to Devich, on a similar note, that if you were allowed or you had a bank of credits that you could carry forward for all through your life, say a credit for what you studied at undergraduate level, a credit for some certificate that you've done somewhere, a credit for your XLRI kind of a thing, or for that matter, you got a credit for what we call as recognition of prior learning, which means what you've learned on the job. Would you have, what are your thoughts about such a system?
So I'm not sure I got the question right, but
so the question is that we are now into a lifelong learning environment. And every now and then we have to dip in and out of this learning, continuing to upskill ourselves. Very often we are also required to show by way of a credential that we have completed certain learning requirements. Now, there are a number of ways you can do that. One is that you can demonstrate that you've learned these skills on the job, and that is in industry languages called recognition of prior learning. That
Right.
means you don't actually sit and attend classes or either online or something like that, but your skills that you acquired on the job. Second is that you have done certain courses at different points in time. You've done your graduation, you've done your masters, you may have done some certificate, course somewhere. And if you were like, there was a central bank of your learning credits where all of these kind of fitted in, and you could easily demonstrate that, and they're all aligned to a skills framework or an education framework. Would that system would have been helpful to you? One is the two aspects. Talk about recognition of prior learning, which is recognition of skills acquired on the job. And number two is that if you had this flexibility of having this learning bank, which you could demonstrate, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure, sir. I mean, thanks for setting the context right. And in terms of the second part, which is kind of having the learning back of credits from my academic background and, from my undergrad and masters, I mean, that would really help. And, on the job, as I perform my role right now, sometimes, I mean, there are absolutely a lot of days where I think that, this particular course, had I had this access right now to get back, revise my basics and, from that, when I was doing that during my education, I mean, it did not make a lot of sense to study that. But right now, there are days where I figure out, I wish I had this chance of going back to XLRI or to my, NIT and learning this course back and having now with the hands of knowledge that I have on the role, maybe refresh the logics and, refresh the background that I have to perform it better. And second, I mean, the recognition of prior skills. I mean, that's absolutely that. What you learn on the job is probably that you cannot emulate in the education, but that does not shy away from the fact that, coming back to the basics and with a few tweaks here and there with the from the industry outlook, absolutely coming back to education would be, I mean, a great opportunity as well as a great helping hand to all the professionals right there to, from the experience that we have on the job, going back to the courses and understand the real value of what they brought to the table. And having an access would really be a great helping hand to, outperform.
Okay, thank you. Now, Professor Rao, on the same note, do you think our system can allow for a student to do one subject from IIT Delhi, then do a MOOC from edX, or then get some component of credit for RPL or recognition of prior learning, then go on to maybe MIT University in Pune and do another subject, all adding towards a credential or a degree? You are on mute. Yeah.
It's an important point. I think that for that to happen, we need to turn the IIT system upside down. We haven't been doing it. In a way, if you look at IIT system, you conduct the world's toughest exams, admit a few people, and then give them degrees. I think that there is no exit barrier. There is only an entry barrier. Now, to able to scale up our education and all that, we need to reduce the entry barrier. Let people enter the IIT system more easily, but then create an exit barrier so that the brand value will remain. You conduct these online exams and all of that. We are looking at that model right now at IIT Delhi. In fact, in the next few months, you will hear certificate courses which are IIT Delhi certified. I mean, we are joining hands with some of these private players, the companies which are in the education space, all the names that you took, Coursera, Upgrad, and all of them. So we are now signing agreements with them so that we can offer more and more certificate programs to anyone who wants to learn that continuing education program kind of a thing. And I think for that we want to admit more people, but conduct an exam to give them certificates. So I think we are now looking at it. But between IITs, the transition is easy. I mean, somebody can take a course in IIT Bombay and come to us, and we will count it as a credit. But it's not done across the board because India is also a very diverse country. The standards are also very different, and through an MOU we will be able to do that. But I think across the board that I have taken a course in this institution, therefore you consider it in IIT Delhi, there are still challenges to do that, but eventually I think once education gets normalized and some uniformity is built in terms of standards, hopefully that day will also come. But the scale up is very important. I know it's happening now, I can tell you.
Love your comments. I'm kind of, I've been out of IIT Delhi for a lot of years, and I'm really, feeling very happy to see the kind of changes which I've, when you came to Sydney and we learned about it and what I'm hearing now. So great job. Now over to you, Narayanan. You see, you have been a very strong proponent of the credit bank and RPL. So what are your thoughts in terms of, and do you think that the new education policy is helping in that particular direction?
Yeah, in fact, new education policy almost reinforces this concept of multiple entry and exit, right? To that extent, I do believe, and that in some sense, it is a mindset change for our education institutions. Not just India, but across. And Oxford will grant a degree only if you subscribe to all those that the Oxford University system has prescribed. There is a Senate that says this is how you will do, this is the courses you will take, this is the time period, and unless you adhere to it, you will not get an Oxford degree. Like increasingly, I'm asking who cares about an Oxford. I'm just, necessarily being provocative. Of course, people do care about Oxford degrees and IIT degrees. But going forward, to me, knowledge and ability to gain those skills are more important than saying that I'll be boxed at whatever Oxford is offering at that point of time with all the right intentions. What does that mean? That means two things. One, in my system, I should be able to pick and choose from what the learner wants rather than what the Senate and teacher wants. Suppose I'm this engineering student and I want to learn fine arts. I believe unless I have fine arts as a part of my portfolio, and as I think you or the professor rightly said, professor said actually, environmental norms are so important. Litigation is becoming very, very important, right? And managing human resources is becoming so important. Or for example, if you're a civil engineer, maybe water technology is so important that is not taught as a part of civil. It's my prerogative to pick and choose something that is either co-curricular or completely different. So that is within the university system. That itself is going to be a challenge because I need to have on-the-go flexibility, and let's also empathize with the universities. Now, anybody can come and say, I'll put all these things, give me a degree. How do you make sure that your number of credits, your proficiency is good enough to be called a graduate of my institution? It's not at all easy. For them also, it is a big, big learning to be able to allow certain combination and allow certain level to which they should gain these credits, and also the time period. Suppose I'm learning civil engineering. I learned civil engineering in 2020. Somebody comes in 2030 and says, I've learned the basics, now I'll do only the next part. How is it relevant? So how do you choose, or how do you decide till when is the particular credit that you've got relevant? Not again easy. It's very easy for consultants to suggest these things. I know how difficult it is to implement, but it is important that educational institutions will get onto what is a credit bank, what is the longevity of this credit bank, what can it be paid, what is the level to which you should go for what could be called a certificate or a diploma or an advanced diploma or a degree with honors or a post, whatever it is. Now comes the second complexity. If I were to also allow credits from outside the...
In the interest of time, I will have to continue because we've just got 4 minutes left, and I'd love to pick up this discussion later on. Now, I just want to go around the table and ask for 5 recommendations as to how we can make our system more effective, whether it is, with the new education policy or an entrepreneurial mindset or whatever. And I would like to start with Professor Rao. So, Professor Rao, 5 recommendations.
Yeah, I think whether we call it 5 or not, I would say that our institutions need to become creative. The higher education, I think unless our institutions become creative, innovative in terms of what we deliver, I don't see anything changing for us. And how do institutions become creative? to me, institutions need to become the idea factories. And for us to become those idea factories, we need to bring unlike minds together. Our institutions have remained very homogeneous for a very long time. I think what are these unlike minds? Unlike minds in terms of attitudes. Bring people who have very different attitudes together. That's where industry, academia, collaborations are very important. Bring people who have gone through completely different disciplinary training together. That is where interdisciplinary training is very important. And also bring people who have completely different cultural backgrounds. That is where admitting international students is also very important. So to me, in terms of attitudes, in terms of cultures, in terms of disciplines, our institutions now need to become those melting pots, out of which will come new ideas, out of which institutions will become known. I think that is what we need to do in our institutions.
Fabulous. Love it. Divich, let's not talk about 5 recommendations, but recommendations for how we can really change the education system.
Yes, sir. So for me, one recommendation, I mean, adding to what Professor Rao said, and he pretty much covered the whole spectrum of it, but just adding to it, I mean, a lot more focus on traits in addition to skills would also help in terms of what Narayan sir just brought out, like communication, building a personal brand, collaboration in a multicultural environment, and, a more self-driven attitude, which is not driven by how many marks you get or, how many tests that you perform. Those kind of trade focused education in addition to the skill education that we right now have might also develop and bring out that idea factory that Professor Rao just hinted towards.
Fabulous. So what you're saying is softer skills as well as a skills component.
Yep.
Okay, so now Manish, over to you. What recommendation?
Yes, I would like to say that students should be groomed from a really young age to take up more of what they want, and should also be taught how to adapt to the changing scenarios of technology or management or whatever they're interested in. Because like the other panelists said, it's really important to groom a student or a professional not only for now but as well as the future. And also they should be very open-minded, and they should try to speak to as many people as possible, develop relations with the professors and teachers from as young as possible, so that they know more with how things were going on with their teachers and their friends of teachers. So I'm saying they should network as much as they can, and try to look out for opportunities.
So, in other words, you see, one is start early and introduce the concept of mentoring, which will kind of help all the way through. Appreciate. Now, over to you, Narayanan.
Sure. So I'm just reinforcing or reiterating what we had discussed. One is to expose the students to what is happening in industry, in civil society, in other walks, and not give the shock factor when they get out of university. Second, allow them to experiment, allow them to make mistakes, give them a laboratory environment, irrespective of whether it is science, physics, law, linguistics, commerce, whatever it is. Third, teach them fundamentals. You need not jump. The situation has changed. The content is there everywhere. So teach them fundamentals on what is, how to be curious and how to communicate, how to be resilient and all the rest of it. Allow interoperability, have a question bank, allow them to actually get credits, stop when they require, make it a learner-centric environment. Last but not the least, I think universities should move towards a perpetual enrollment. Gone are the days when somebody gets enrolled and after 4 years or 6 years they're out. Once they join a university, the mindset should be, how can I engage the student for about their lifetime, because that is required now.
Fabulous. Look, I have thoroughly enjoyed the session and talking to this, great spectrum of different stakeholder groups. And it's a journey that we are on. And I'm delighted to see this perspective because I can see change happening, because we have to think along these lines. We've got to kind of get the multidisciplinary approach. We've got to get acceptance of experimentation. And just like in the Bay Area, failure is taken as a badge of honor. We have to allow people to, go through that, coupled with, other changes which are coming along. Thank you once again for joining in. And I look forward to engaging further down the line with all of you. So back to you, Sudhir. And once again, thank you very much, and bye from Sydney.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pradeep. I mean, that was really a warming up session. I think you set the context so well. Thanks for being so warm from a so very cold place and getting this conversation started with so many perspectives. I think we kind of redefined our fundamentals of the way and functions of the university, how we should be looking at future skills ready workforces. And I think the perspectives that Professor Rao, thank you so much for bringing in the lovely IIT way of doing things, but also radically talking about the ideas factory.
Yes.
Is a fantastic point that you made. And I'm very impressed with your immersion programs that are being planned at the IITs. I think that's a great model for all our universities and education systems to follow. I think Narayanan, your perspective was fabulous. Some redefining moments in the way you articulated the future of learning, future of skills, and I think the very fabric on which we are built as both individuals and I think the future of industry. So thank you so much, Mr. Narayanan. Manish, your perspectives as a student, I think, was reverberating to the youth that was hearing you. Plan early, work towards those goals, look at multi-skilling yourself. I think you said it all. And I'm sure the youth has taken your word because of your attitude to succeed. And Divij, thanks for bringing in that youth perspective of a young professional, how you changed your own career path to learning new things and excelling in what you're doing today as a technologist, I think is commendable. So thanks so much, panel. I think we couldn't have had a better representation for the future world and for future skills. From our hearts, thank each one of you all for taking time out and being part of YCC 2020.